A plan to end the war got our hopes up before they came crashing down again. That and more on Today Unpacked's This Week Unpacked by Unpacked. Some of the top stories this week. Deal of the week. A proposal to end the war in Gaza is getting floated by Egypt. The proposal has 3 phases. It begins with a pause in the fighting with the release of hostages and prisoners, then the formation of a new Palestinian government, and finally a comprehensive ceasefire, return of all hostages and an unspecified number of Palestinian prisoners, and an Israeli withdrawal from Gaza. So after initial reports indicated that Hamas's political chief was interested in the proposal, Yahya Sinwar, leader of Hamas in Gaza, was quick to put the kibosh on the idea. Now Israel is considering the proposal, but it made clear that it's willing to continue the war as long as it takes. The opening salvo in classic Middle Eastern negotiations, over the course of the week, the US and Qatar continued to push the plan. UN says what?
What?
After days of intense negotiations, the UN Security Council finally approved a resolution that calls for 3 main points. First, increased aid to Gaza. Second, the release of all hostages. And third, the creation of conditions for a sustainable cessation of hostilities. Dozens killed in incident. Sunday night, an Israeli airstrike hit at least 3 houses in Gaza's Al Maghazi refugee camp, with Hamas saying 70 to 100 people were killed. The story received coverage in Arab, Israeli, and international press, and the IDF tersely responded, "We are reviewing the incident."
Oh, cool. Go. No doubt.
Iran.
Iran.
An Israeli airstrike in Syria killed a senior officer of the Iranian military who was allegedly responsible for arming Hezbollah, Israel's northern neighbor that continues daily rocket attacks against Israel. A few hours later, Iran-backed militants in Iraq injured 4 US troops in an attack, with the US then carrying out counterstrikes against Iranian-backed groups in Iraq. And Iran-backed rebels continued to attack ships off the coast of Yemen as an international coalition brought firepower into the area to protect commercial shipping.
See, everything's fine.
Iran again. The UN Atomic Energy Agency confirmed that Iran has tripled production of near weapons-grade uranium. Iran dismissed the claim, saying,
"Nothing to see here, please!"
AI Ye. Pop icon and sometimes anti-Semite Ye, aka Kanye West, cleared his Instagram of everything but a post in Hebrew, apologizing for his past anti-Semitic outbursts. The wording seemed to be AI generated, which proves the advice: if you don't have something nice to say, ask AI how to say it. Holocaust-ish. Doctors Against Genocide put out an urgent call to action to stop the genocide in Gaza, telling medical professionals to gather inside the National Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. After outrage over a protest inside a Holocaust museum, the canceled event was sort of rebranded as a visit for educational purposes. And finally, some not horrible news. Andrea Bocelli this week touched Israelis' hearts, but not through song. Freed hostage Yaffa Adar shared that every morning in captivity she would sing Andrea Bocelli songs to herself to keep her spirits up. Bocelli sent Adar a letter inviting her to a show and saying, "I wish I could hug you, Yaffa. You give new meaning to my music."
Mio grazie.
This week we're going to look at 2 stories to see how they were reported differently in different outlets.
Resolution number 1.
See, after the UN Security Council managed to agree on the wording of their resolution, news outlets proceeded to disagree on what had been agreed upon. Arab outlets generally ignored the resolution's demand for the release of hostages. Israeli Yediot Ahronot didn't mention the cessation of hostilities, aside from pointing out that the resolution did not specifically call for a ceasefire, while driving home the point that Israel maintains the right to inspect any aid entering Gaza.
Israel's main goal is to be able to continue the war against Hamas, and insofar as the resolution doesn't force Israel's hand to stop the war prematurely, that is the Israeli focus. While allowing for humanitarian aid to go into Gaza, Israel's allowed to continue its war.
So why can't reporters just report the facts? I'd love to see your thoughts in the comments.
Okay, what else?
What's been so sad since the beginning of the war is the way that civilian casualties have been used as a tool of war. And while the numbers are staggering and horrifying, it's impossible to verify the death count of the war, or a given day in the war, or even a single event in the war. The numbers that make it to print often end up revealing more about the press's biases than perhaps the actual facts. You can see this in the different ways Sunday night's airstrike was reported. Al Jazeera English relied on correspondents who put the number at more than 100. Interestingly, Al Jazeera Arabic, as well as other international outlets, went with at least 70. The New York Times settled on dozens, while Yediot Ahronot took a different angle, saying the Palestinians claimed among the dead were 12 women and 7 children. and left it at that.
We live in a world where media outlets are expected to report real time and with detail. In a context in which the Gazan Health Ministry, aka Hamas, is willing to supply those numbers quickly and without regard for accuracy, we can see the inherent bias with a lot of these organizations, with a lot of these media outlets, in terms of their willingness to accept those numbers at face value.
I think that's enough.
Now we'll take a look at this week in Jewish history. Sunday commemorates the 1854 passing of Judah Touro, one of the original Jewish American philanthropists. He gave to synagogues, hospitals, individuals, and even helped fund the first Jewish neighborhood outside the walls of the old city of Jerusalem. Tuesday is known as Purim and Kona. Yeah, I didn't know about that one either. A festival celebrating the day in 1690 when an earthquake hit Ancona, Italy, destroying buildings across the city, but sparing the entire Jewish quarter except for one home. We can probably assume the owners of that house were a bunch of jerks. Thursday marks the day in 1496 when the King of Portugal decreed the Jews of Portugal would be expelled. And finally, in other earthquake news, Friday is the anniversary of an earthquake in 1837 that killed nearly 5,000 Jews in northern Israel and sent many of the survivors to Hebron, revitalizing the small Jewish community there.
When I heard the amazing story about my fellow Bubby, Yaffa Adar's singing quietly to herself Andrea Bocelli's music, I spent the evening listening to Andrea Bocelli, and it was beautiful. And Yaffa said that in order to get through those long nights in Hamas captivity, she relived the memories of her life. So what kind of memories are we making for ourselves, for our families, for our children? Let's make sure to fill our lives with good memories that can come to the fore if we ever need them, with love, with thankfulness, with positivity, and with strength.
In this week's Torah reading, Jacob is blessing all of his 12 sons before he passes on from this world. And he has some very choice words for Shimon and Levi. Mind you, Shimon and Levi, one of the things that they're remembered for is the massacre of the men of Shechem after they kidnapped and raped their sister Dinah. And Jacob says to them, you use the tools of Hamas. The word Hamas in Hebrew means cruelty. And he admonishes them not for using violence against evil people, but for allowing that violence to affect their character and for actually playing a role in their abuse of their brother Joseph, in selling him into slavery. So I think it's a very important lesson that even when we have to use violence for justice, for self-defense, we have to be wary of how it affects our own character.
Looking ahead, keep an eye on how Arabic media portrays the ongoing negotiations, as it'll likely be indicative of the plan's ultimate viability.